Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our roundup October edition. We thank you for joining in large number. Uh, the indirect tax laws are undergoing through continuous changes, and fortunately, we are never out of content. Uh, we try to have something interesting in every roundup edition. So in the recent past, be it GST, the whole compliance landscape has changed, and there are many changes which the government proposed in recent GST Council meeting, which will have a significant impact on the taxpayers. E-invoicing is another important change which the government has brought in. Even on the customs and foreign trade policy front, significant changes have been made, be it the cap brought in on MEIS scheme, the roadmap for RODTP, the Carota rules, etc. So the whole indirect tax regime is undergoing a change even after 3 years of GST. So today I'm joined by Akanksha, who is a senior associate in our firm, and uh, in today's roundup, we'll be covering roadmap of GST compliances, e-invoicing, recent changes, some recent news, fate of export incentives, SCIS, MEIS, RODTP, and lastly, the legal precedents which have come up in the month of September. And we'll conclude our session with live question and answers. So over to you, Akanksha.
Thank you, Puneet. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Puneet correctly highlighted, there are a lot of changes which have come up in compliances. Now let's see how exactly this roadmap of GST compliances looks like. Starting with the present scenario. So as we know currently, GSTR 1 is filed on 11th of the next month, basis which GSTR 2A is auto-populated. And on 20th of the next month, we file GSTR 3B. Importantly, few changes have been brought into 2A, and this is reflecting in all the 2As starting from April 2020. Import of goods from outside India and from SEZ are reflecting in 2A. Also, a very important feature has been incorporated in 2A, which is suppliers GSTR 3B and GSTR 1 filing status. So we can see on which date and in which month GSTR 1 has been filed. However, in case of 3B, we can just see the filing status, whether it is being filed or not. Another important change which has been brought in is the introduction of a new return, which was very much in news in the preceding months. That is auto-population of GSTR 2B. Now, we have discussed this 2B, how exactly it functions and what all features it will be having. Let's have a quick recap of all of that.
So one important thing in the last slide is that in the auto-populated, you can just go back. In the auto-populated GSTR 2A, we'll be able to see the filing status, whether the suppliers have filed GSTR 1 and 3B. This assumes important from the perspective that Section 16 of CGST Act, it has one of the conditions that the supplier should pay the tax. So till now, the taxpayers used to take an argument that we don't know whether he has actually filed 3B or not. So to that extent, it will dilute the argument. And once GSTR 1 and 3B are linked and the recipient is able to see whether the supplier's 3B has been filed, it will be a reasonable assurance or confirmation to the recipient as to whether the supplier has paid the tax or not. So from an ITC perspective also, it's an important change.
Now let us see what are the features of GSTR 2B. So it will be auto-populated details, which will be frozen by 12th of next month. There will be majorly two parts to 2B. First, ITC available summary, and another would be ITC not available summary. The basis for not availment of summary, ITC, would be ITC which has been claimed beyond due date under Section 16(4) of CGST Act, which is the September date which we are currently following for all ITC availment. Another reason would be where supplier's GSTIN and place of supply are in the same state, whereas the recipient is in another state. So this is how exactly it will be looking, and you can download also from the portal in PDF format or in the Excel format. Moving forward, this is another feature in line with GSTR 2B for invoice-wise level reconciliation that can be done. So the government has introduced the feature of offline matching tool. So in this, what exactly we need to do is, presently whatever purchase register is being maintained by all the taxpayers, we have to fill all the details in a prescribed format. So this is the format of the offline matching tool, where we need to provide the details in a specific format, which has to be uploaded on the portal, and then all the matching and reconciliation of 2B and purchase register of offline tool will be done by the portal itself. So this can be a very useful tool, because what all bases will be considered for matching are GSTIN, document type, document number, document date, taxable value, total tax amount, and tax amounts headwise. So we can take this tool as a useful tool. Other than this, if anyone wants to internally in-house, they have to do this reconciliation. That can be done, because that will be an important basis for the purpose of ITC availment going forward. Now, in the 42nd Council meeting, there have been some proposed changes considering all these introduction of 2B, matching tool, 2A, changes in 2A. Now, how exactly the scenario would be in the upcoming months for GST return filing system? Let's have a look. On 11th, we'll continue to file GSTR1 of the next month. One additional requirement as of now that we know is it's not mandatory to disclose the HSN summary details in GSTR1. However, we are providing the details in invoices, but it's not the main criteria to avail the ITC. However, in 42nd Council meeting, they have proposed that going forward, it will be a requirement to declare the HSN and SSC for goods and services on invoices and GSTR1 basis the turnover. So if the aggregate annual turnover is up to 1.5 crores, presently there is no requirement to maintain any HSN. However, it has been proposed that there will be a requirement to maintain a 4-digit level summary, but this is only applicable for B2B supplies. For aggregate annual turnover above 1.5 crores and below 5 crores, presently it's a requirement of 2 digits, and it is proposed to maintain a 4-digit summary for B2B supplies only. If the aggregate annual turnover is above 5 crores, presently it's mandatory and all the companies are also maintaining a 4-digit HSN summary. However, this is an important change that now the government is proposing it will be a 6-digit summary, and also it will be applicable for all types of supplies, which means B2B and B2C. All these above changes will be effective from April 1, 2021. Also, they have proposed that the government will be empowered to notify goods or class of supplies for which 8-digit HSN will be required. So as the government's intention is very clear from this, that now or even in the upcoming months, sooner or later, 6-digit and 8-digit will be very much mandatory. HSN summary will be required. So it is advisable that as soon as possible, all the companies should start maintaining 8-digit HSN summary itself. Because even for e-invoicing also, the requirement has been increased. It is minimum 6-digit, 4-digit and 6-digit, and 8-digit is also proposed there. So it seems to be in line with e-invoicing concept. Moving on. As you all know that e-invoicing has already been introduced from 1st of October 2020, and it is only applicable where the aggregate turnover of the taxpayers is more than 500 crores. Now, the one more feature which was introduced or which was proposed earlier for e-invoicing is that basis the e-invoices generated on the IRP portal, that is invoice registration portal, GSTR1 would be auto-populated. Now, the government is proposing to introduce the GST e-invoicing for all the B2B supplies. That means, irrespective of the turnover, all kinds of B2B supplies will be covered under e-invoicing from 1st of April 2021, which indirectly means that now even the GSTR1 will be auto-populated for all such transactions, irrespective of turnover. Moving on. Once the GSTR1 is filed on 11th, all the details will be auto-populated in GSTR2A. On 12th, GSTR2B will be auto-populated and it will be freezed in the read-only mode. And on 20th of next month, we'll be filing GSTR3B. Now, very important feature which has been proposed in 42nd Council meeting is that there will be an auto-population of liability from GSTR1 to GSTR3B. Presently, if we look at the portal, they have introduced the feature of downloading a PDF summary where you can see all the GSTR1 details reflecting in that PDF, and that can be used as a basis for filing GSTR3B. However, this auto-population has not been activated so far. Also, they have proposed to do the auto-population of ITC details from 2B to GSTR3B. All these changes will be implemented from 1st of January 2021. Now, the question arises that which return would be considered for the reconciliation purposes, the vendor reconciliation. That would be GSTR2B, because it's very clear that the intention of the government for the purpose of availment of ITC is 2B. So it is more relevant that we should consider 2B as the base for the purpose of availing ITC in 3B. Also, another question is, will we discontinue the reconciliation that we are currently doing through 2A? The answer is no, because vendor reconciliation through 2A will still be very relevant, specifically to have a check that whether our vendors are compliant or not, the returns are being filed on timely basis or not, and accordingly we can send them the communications to be compliant so that our ITC is not blocked.
So one important aspect which all of you can note is that when GST was being introduced, the government planned to introduce GSTR 1, 2, and 3, where 1 was supposed to be an output statement, 2 was supposed to be an input statement, and 3 was supposed to be the return. So the slide in front of you, after 3.5 years of GST on January 2021, we may be implementing GSTR 1, 2, 3 format only. Maybe the name of the returns have changed. One will be the output liability, which will form basis of output liability in 3B. 2B will be based on GSTR 1 of the suppliers or import details, etc., which will again be auto-populated in 3B. So effectively, you can say it's an old wine in new bottle, or the government has taken that much time in implementing the original returns. But yeah, from a taxpayer's perspective, every passing month there are incremental compliance changes, B2B, import details matching, and whenever these compliance requirements add the notices from the government for mismatch, etc., they also arise. So a significant scale up all of you also need to do to implement these changes in your business as well.
Now, considering all these changes happening in the compliance returns and all the GST returns, there are few changes that have been made on the portal itself. First, very important change is the delinking of the credit and debit notes with original tax invoice. That means that now we do not need to provide any tax invoice number details while we are uploading the credit note or debit note details in GSTR1. So this is a big relaxation for all the taxpayers going forward, and it has been activated on the portal itself. Another important facility which has been brought in is e-way bill generation facility which will be blocked. So currently, as per Rule 138E, it specifically provides that if there is any non-compliance in filing of GSTR 3B, then for the past consecutive 2 months, then the e-way bill generation facility will be blocked for that particular GSTIN. And in that case, both consignor, consignee, transporter, no one would be able to generate the e-way bill. However, now they have made a slight change in that rule which was there. They have done this generation facility blockage basis your turnover, which means only in cases where the aggregate annual turnover exceeds 5 crores, only in those cases the e-way bill generation facility will be blocked, which means that in other cases where the aggregate turnover is less than 5 crores, practically it will not be blocked and we can continue with the e-way bill generation. Also, this is only implemented for GSTR 3B, not filed for 2 or more consecutive months. As and when we do the compliance and the returns are filed, it will be unblocked the next day. All these changes will be implemented from October 15th, 2020. Also, GST portal infrastructure has been scaled up to handle 3 lakh users, which means that it should be more smoother for us while filing the GST returns, annual returns, and all the compliances on the GST portal. Moving on, now let's talk about the small taxpayers. There have been few recommendations in 42nd Council meeting regarding the small taxpayers. One is small taxpayers having turnover up to 5 crores. Now they will have an option to file the quarterly return. However, the tax will be paid on monthly basis only. For the payment of this tax, the taxpayers can pay 35% of net cash tax liability of last quarter in the first 2 months of the quarter using auto-generated challan, which means that whatever net cash liability was paid by the taxpayers in the last quarter, that is October to December 2020, 35% of that amount would be paid as an advance in the first 2 months of the quarter, that is January 2021 and February 2021. And there will be some specific auto-generated challans which will be used for the payment of these liabilities. All these changes would be applicable from 1st January 2021. So this is a very important change. There is not much clarity regarding how exactly this challan will be applicable, where it will be visible. So let us see how exactly it will be implemented on the portal practically. Moving on, as we all know that e-invoicing has been introduced from 1st of October 2020, and a lot of taxpayers, I believe that most of the taxpayers have already started generating e-invoicing for all their B2B supplies also, if their turnover is exceeding 500 crores. However, there have been a lot of ambiguities regarding how exactly few transactions will be catered in e-invoicing. So there have been few FAQs where these ambiguities have been clarified. As we have already discussed in the preceding slides, that currently the invoicing is applicable only for B2B transactions where the turnover is exceeding 500 crores. However, it is proposed that the government may implement e-invoicing for all the types of B2B transactions, irrespective of turnover, from 1st of April 2021. Also, there was recently a notification in which it was stated that it will be mandatory for the purpose of computing aggregate turnover for e-invoicing. Any financial year starting from 17-18 would be considered to ensure that whether the taxpayer had a turnover exceeding 500 crores or not, which means that earlier we only used to take up consider the turnover of 19-20 financial year. Now, in any financial year, if it exceeds 500 crores, we definitely need to implement e-invoicing. Taxpayers having turnover exceeding 500 crores But still, if the portal shows the status as e-invoice is not enabled for this taxpayer, then they have an option to go in the registration option, file a self-declaration, and then they can inform the department that they definitely fall under this category of e-invoicing, and it will be enabled. Even though it was very clear from the earlier INV1 format and all the notifications that e-invoicing would be applicable for all the types of export transactions as well. However, this has been specifically now mentioned in the notification that it is applicable for exports transactions as well. This is a very important point, and there have been a lot of ambiguities around it, that whether e-invoicing would be required for RCM transactions, self-invoicing transactions or not. So now through FAQs, it has been clarified that e-invoicing will not be required for self-invoice, which has been issued under reverse charge cases. Only in specific cases, which are B2B transactions under reverse charge, e-invoicing would be generated, but only if my supplier is covered under the requirement of e-invoicing. Another important feature which has been introduced in the schema INV01 is the column of other charges. As we know, there are different types of charges for different companies, like freight charges, TCS, insurance charges. Now, there was an issue that where we should mention it. They have clarified that it should be reported separately under the column other charges, and basis that we can compute the final taxable value. Also, a relaxation has been given for few of the only for the month of October 2020, that an option has been given to issue normal invoices for the specific month, which means we can continue to generate normal invoices and obtain their IRN from the portal within 30 days from the date of invoice. However, if this IRN is not generated and not obtained from the portal within this 30 days period, then that invoice would be considered as invalid, and any movement or transaction made on basis of that invoice will be invalid.
So the whole way in which e-invoice has been implemented, it's very, very unfortunate. On the last day when e-invoice was supposed to come, suddenly the government changes the threshold. So earlier, the requirement of turnover being in excess of 500 crore in any financial year from 17-18 was not there. In fact, the earlier FAQs and their whole portal, their own portal indicated that the turnover of only 19-20 has to be seen. So suddenly it led to many taxpayers falling under this basket. Secondly, even this relaxation of 30 days that only the IRN can be obtained, that also came at the last moment. So all this created a total chaos for the taxpayers. And our only advice to the taxpayers is, I think the government seems to be very hell-bent that all B2B transactions, or at least it seems that from January 2021, they may reduce this threshold of 500 crore to 100 crore, that the taxpayers need to be IT ready from an e-invoice perspective.
One very important, there was a bar that all the IRNs have to be generated within 24 hours as soon as the JSON file is uploaded on the portal. However, considering the issues which are the challenges which are being faced by the taxpayers, this condition has been done away with. That means now if invoice is generated, it is not mandatory to generate the IRN for it within 24 hours. Moving on, the QR code has been made a mandatory particular on the invoice, and to make this as a mandatory particular, Rule 46R has been sub-rule R has been inserted in Rule 46, which clarifies that now the QR code printing on the invoice is also a mandatory particular. Production of electronic QR code having embedded IRN will be sufficient for verification of the proper officer. This is more relevant for the movement of goods. So currently the e-bill and e-invoice in a physical copy is being used for the transporters. So going on, we won't be requiring any physical copy of the invoice. Earlier, as we know, from October 1st, 2020, the government proposed to implement e-invoicing, not e-invoicing, but there was a requirement to mandatory print the dynamic QR code on all the B2C invoices as well for the payment purposes. However, now they have deferred this to 1st of December 2020. This is a big relaxation. We'll be getting more time to analyze how exactly QR code will be functional, how this has to be implemented in the systems for the payment purposes. So that's all from my side. I would request Mr. Puneet to take it further.
Thank you, Kanksha. So we'll come to the recent news. So on GST side, from January 2021, the refunds will be paid in the bank account of the taxpayer, which are linked with PAN and Aadhaar. Second, this whole debate on interest on net cash GST liability, the change in the law, retrospective amendment. Finally, CBIC has instructed its officers that for the period July 2017 to August 2020, interest has to be recovered on net liability only, not gross liability. And for the past, wherever the show cause notices has been issued demanding interest on gross liability, those should be put in the call book till retrospective amendment is made. So this will come as a big relief for the taxpayers as well, that interest will be paid on net liability only. GST exemption on export freight by sea and air, it has been extended from September 2020 to September 2021. On customs and foreign trade policy side, the formats of bill of entry have been amended. The declarations in line with Carotar have been put now. A very important change that for issuing show cause notices, filing refund applications, wherever the due dates were falling between March 20th and December 30th, they have been extended till December 31st. So this has been done in the ordinance, which had come due to COVID-19, etc. So it'll apply both to the department also when they have to issue any notice, order, etc. And equally apply to the taxpayer also if he has to file any appeal, refund, etc. The downside to it is that there are many show cause notices which department was planning to issue relating to excise, service tax, etc. Pre-GST regime. So now they have gotten extra time towards that. CAG has pulled up DGFT that the export incentives which they give like MEIS, SEIS, etc. So they have suggested that there should be an automated foolproof system, and CAG has found that a lot of leakages happen while granting these incentives. On others category, the whole Indo-China dispute now it is having impact on doing business within India also. As per news reports, there were some state incentives which had to be given to 4 Chinese companies in Uttar Pradesh because they have set up large plants in the state. But due to all this border dispute, the UP government seems to put those incentives on hold, which is totally illegal. As per a recent survey, though due to COVID-19, many of the court procedures like filing, hearings, etc., have been taken place in an electronic or virtual format, but still half of the high courts are yet to take even first step towards this. They don't have even the electronic filing system at place, which is unfortunate. Now, before we come to the legal precedents, fate of export incentives, there's a special section which we have made considering the recent changes. So starting with SEIS, which is an export incentive scheme for the services. So the foreign trade policy 2015-20 was applicable till March 2020. The government extended it by a year due to COVID-19. As far as 2019-20 is concerned, the government has yet to notify eligible categories and rate of services. It is likely, as per news reports, that the categories may be reduced, reward may be reduced. Similarly, as far as the period April 20 to March 2021 is concerned, government is yet to decide on continuation of scheme. So, unfortunate from service exports perspective, as far as 1920 is concerned, in our view, it was a promise which was made by the government, and on 31st March 2020, they cannot say that they will not grant benefit for the past year. But yes, going forward, from April 2020, having decided, having been informed in advance, etc., the withdrawal is valid. But yeah, as far as service exporters is concerned, it will be a big blow because these incentives used to range between 5 to 7%. As far as MEIS is concerned, on April 15, 2020, DGFT issued a trade notice stating that till RODTP is introduced, the benefit of MEIS will continue. As per that trade notice, the date was December 2020. In between, there were many interactions of Mr. Piyush Goyal with the industry, number of press releases, etc., which indicated that MEIS will continue. But then suddenly on 31st August 2020, the government has introduced two caps on MEIS. One is that per exporter, it will not exceed 2 crores. Secondly, they have put an overall cap of 5,000 crores on MEIS claims that for a 4-month period, September 2020 to December 2020, if the total claims exceed 5,000 crore, they will be proportionately reduced. So just to give an idea, in 2019-20, the total claims which the government sanctioned was 45,000 crore. So proportionate for 4-month period, the government ought to have budget of 15,000 crore, against which they have only kept 5,000 crore. So 50 to 60%, in any case, further reduction is likely for either the large exporters on 2 crore or for the smaller exporters as well. So as far as MEIS is concerned, the government has justified it that 98% of exporters are unaffected. The government has computed this figure based on number of exporters rather than the value of exports. In our view, the affected exporters can challenge this amendment through a writ petition. First, on the ground of promissory estoppel, that there was a clear, unequivocal promise from the government from April 2020 till August 2020 that till RODTP is introduced, this benefit will continue. There was never ever a communication or indication that this benefit will be reduced in between. The government ought to have acted in a legitimate way. The taxpayers had a legitimate expectation for this benefit till December 2020. There's an element of retrospectivity also, because there are many export contracts entered before September 2020 to which this cap will apply, whereas the exporters would have factored in this benefit while pricing the export products. There's a discrimination between large and small exporters. And lastly, it's against public interest. So in our view, this ceiling is amenable to a legal challenge on multiple grounds, which many exporters are planning to do also. Coming to RODTP, in October 2019, the WTO pronounced a ruling in which most of the Indian export schemes, including MEIS, they were held to be violative of SCM agreement because they did not have any correlation with the taxes on export products. On March 4, 2020, the government announced formulation of RODTP scheme. The government said that it will replace MEIS. On March 13th, the cabinet approved this scheme. The salient features of this scheme was that it will reimburse all taxes and duties for which credit or refund is otherwise not available, like VAT and excise duty on fuel, taxes on electricity, stamp duty, uh, GST, ITC, which is ineligible under 17(5), etc., any other taxes incurred by suppliers. And this benefit is supposed to be above duty drawback, advance authorization, EPCG, and GST refund. It will be computed on a percentage of FOB value of export goods. And it will be in the form of transferable scrips in the electronic ledger of exporters. On August 10, 2020, the CBIC has sought data from various export promotion councils, industry association, chambers of commerce to determine what will be the quantum of benefit which will be granted. They have issued 3 forms, R1, R2, and R3. So way forward, what we recommend to all of you is collate product-wise data, variant-wise data, because the incidence of taxes may vary. Include such embedded taxes. These may actually differ from company to company based on their supply chain, location, etc. Taxpayers should timely submit this data to the government so that the government should not end up in fixing a lower or any ad hoc rate. RODTP committee is expected to discussions with industry and trade bodies in second half of October. So this is very relevant for all exporter taxpayers that they collate all the incidents of taxes they incur with regard to the export goods and submit as soon as possible to the government so that the higher rate of RODTP is fixed. Coming to the last section of precedents. First, we have a couple of rulings relating to effective date of increase in customs duty. So the first ruling actually relates to this Pulwama attack, immediately after which the government imposed 200% customs duty on goods imported from Pakistan. So in this case, the importer filed bill of entry prior to the issuance of notification. The matter went to Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court held that the taxpayer satisfied all the conditions of Section 15 of Customs Act. The rate of duty crystallizes at the date and time of presentation of bill of entry, by which time the notification had not come. Subsequent publication of notification, which happened in this case, that cannot be a ground of reassessment. The Supreme Court also held that there is no power to increase rate of duty retrospectively under Section 8A of the Customs Tariff Act. So important to note that Section 8A empowers government to impose duty in extraordinary situations, which was invoked in this case. So there also the court held that the duty cannot be imposed on a retrospective basis. Moving ahead, the next ruling relates to constitutional validity of Section 25(4) of the Customs Act. So in this case, the court held that Section 25(1) and 2A of Customs Act, they mandate publication of notification in an official gazette. Interestingly, in this case, the Section 25(4) was challenged, which said that the notification will be effective from the date of its issue for publication. So important thing to note is not the date of publication, date of its issue for publication. The court held that this provision is arbitrary and contrary to the main provisions, which talks about publication. The court also held that customs duty cannot be enhanced prior to publication in electronic mode. One of the important thing we also noticed is that in e-gazette or electronic gazette, the date and time of issuance of notification is also printed. So in that case, the bill of entry or the transactions took place prior to issuing of notification in the electronic mode. So this is a Gujarat High Court ruling in case of Ruchi Soya. With regard to refund, this whole procedure under GST is under challenge on various counts. So the first ruling relates to and Rule 93 provides that if the department issues a deficiency memo on a refund application and the taxpayer rectifies it, it will be treated as submission of a fresh application. So many times these deficiency memos are issued on the last moment. So the fresh application itself can become time barred. Secondly, the interest on delayed refund, etc., those also will be lost by the taxpayer. So this provision itself was challenged on the ground that it's violative of Article 14 and 19(1)(g) of Constitution. So the Delhi High Court in case of Incitil Services has admitted it. Similarly, circular of November 2019, which said that correction of a deficiency memo needs to be treated as a fresh application, has been challenged again in Delhi High Court in case of Megacon Impex, where again the matter has been admitted. This blocking of input tax credit is also a very draconian provision. So we have section 73 of CGST Act, which says that if any ITC has been wrongly taken, etc., show cause has been issued. So apart from that, Rule 86 of CGST rules empowers government to block the credit. So this whole provision was challenged on the ground that it's ultra vires section 16 of CGST Act. The taxpayer contended that Rule 86A empowers authorities to block genuine ITC, and this challenge has been accepted in Gujarat High Court in case of Kalp Sutra Gujarat. In another case before Delhi High Court, the court directed the revenue to treat the writ petition as representation where the credit was blocked and directed it to pass a speaking order. So this is in case of Goel Iron and Steel Traders, Delhi High Court. Coming on ITC, this is an interesting advanced ruling, the credit on landfill pit. So this was a digging which took place in which the filling of waste and all those things was done. So the advanced ruling authority noted that landfill pit is a combination of earthwork and other capital goods. It is constructed below ground and hence it's a civil structure, and ITC is not admissible in case of Mother Earth Envirotech. Very interestingly, on the very same day, there was a ruling of SISTAT relating to service tax regime on the identical issue of availability of CENVAT credit on that. So the tribunal held that construction of landfill can be equated with construction of immovable property, but as far as civil structure is concerned, it should be permanent, whereas landfill is temporary because the waste and all those things are temporarily filled there and taken out. And the tribunal allowed CENVAT credit on expenses of setting up of landfills. So interesting to note that on the identical issue, advanced ruling authority continues to have pro-revenue stand, whereas the SISTAT has allowed the credit. Now moving to some other rulings, starting with the Supreme Court. So this ruling relates to direct taxes, but some of the things are relevant for us also. So the ruling relates to robust advanced ruling system. So the Supreme Court held that mediation is always an efficacious remedy. A vibrant advanced ruling system goes a long way in reducing tax litigations, and it recommended central government to make advanced ruling system a comprehensive tool for settlement of disputes, and they can adopt Swedish and New Zealand models. This in case of national cooperative development, but unfortunately the trend which we see in GST is totally adverse. One, because of the constitution of advanced ruling being filled only by the revenue officers. 80 to 90% of the rulings are pro-revenue, and the element of justice is totally missing. Coming to High Court rulings, this is the Madras High Court ruling on refund on input services under inverted tax category. So despite VKC footwear ruling, which held that refund on input services is available, the Madras High Court has held to the contrary. The High Court held that definition of input excludes input services and capital goods. Distinction created between goods and services under section 54(3) is valid. Right to refund is a statutory and can be availed strictly in accordance with law. Section 54(3) curtails entitlement from a particular source like input services in this case, and they held that Rule 89(5) is in conformity with section 54(3). So this is a TVL Transtonal AFCON's ruling of Madras High Court. In our view, this ruling is incorrect, and credit and refund on input services should be allowed. There is a total dichotomy between the rules and the section, and unfortunately, Madras High Court overlooked that dichotomy. Coming to AAARs, the first ruling is whether GST on prize money received for participating in horse race is taxable or not. In this, the first issue before AAAR was that the DGGI investigation proceedings were initiated against the taxpayer under service tax law. So this was one of the objections raised by the revenue. But AAAR held that because those were the proceedings initiated under old law and not GST law, therefore the AR ruling was permissible under section 98(2). As far as merits are concerned, the AAAR held that when a prize money is received, there is no service element, so GST is not payable, and because GST is not payable, then ITC also will not be eligible. In our view, this ruling is correct on merits because there is an absence of supply or service element when one participates in a horse race. Moving ahead, a very interesting ruling on a composite supply. So in this case, the taxpayer's Maharashtra factory was supplying goods and Delhi unit was providing services. Both these constituted distinct persons under GST law. So AAAR held that in this case, supplies were not made by a single taxable person. Even if they are not being part of a single contract, it is not a determinative factor, and therefore it is not a composite supply. So in our view, on law, there is a correct ruling because composite supply talks about two or more supplies by a single taxable person, which was missing in this case. Moving ahead, this famous dispute of rate of GST on paratha. This matter went to AAAR, but without going into the merits, so AAAR considered the issue, what is a proceeding under section 98(2). So AAAR held that it's a prescribed course of action for enforcing legal right. These are steps by which judicial action is invoked. It covers DGGI investigations. It also held that issue of jurisdiction is root. It can be taken even in the appeal or execution. So in this case, because the taxpayer suppressed material facts that under GST itself, it is undergoing DGGI investigations. Therefore, it held that order of advance ruling is invalid. Therefore, the AR order, which held that it will be taxable at higher rate, has been quashed. So it will be presumed that this ruling has never been issued. This is in case of ID Fresh Food. Now coming to advanced rulings. First, in case of rental transactions. So in this case, two issues were on consideration. One, the taxpayer was seeking deduction of statutory levies like property tax, etc. So AR held that statutory levies other than GST are includable in value of rental services. Secondly, there was a question that the notional interest on the deposit, whether it will be included in the value of supply or not. So AR held that only if influences the valuation, it will be includable, otherwise it will not be. So in our view on both the points, AR is correct. Now this is again a very strange ruling which has come. So here two questions were there. First, whether ITC on transportation of employees services will be available, and secondly, whether taxpayer is required to pay GST on employee recoveries or not. So on ITC, AR held that it is available post February 2019, which is a correct ruling. But as far as applicability of GST on employee recovery, it held that GST is not payable, and it relied on entry 1 of Schedule 3. In our view, AR has wrongly applied this entry. This entry actually relates to service supply from employee to employer. Whereas if recovery is being made, the supply is from employer to employee. So to that extent, in our view, this ruling is incorrect. And lastly, they held that ITC will be restricted to the extent of transportation cost borne by employer only. This is in case of Tata Motors. Now coming to SISTAT ruling, this is in case of a joint venture where number of entities come together, form a joint venture for a common objective. So the issue was whether service tax on attribution of business expenditure will be leviable or not. So the tribunal held that when a JV partner deploys its personnel, it is in pursuance of an obligation. Even the capital contribution by any of the JV member is not a consideration for rendering service. Performance of obligations are intending to serve itself and joint venture. Therefore, to contribute to the capital of JV is not a consideration and it's not taxable. In our view, it's a correct and a very important ruling in case of BG exploration and production. The next ruling is levy of service tax on recovery of crude oil transportation charges. In this case, a taxpayer was transporting crude through pipelines, and it was taxpayer's contractual responsibility to deliver crude oil at buyer's premises. Tribunal held that taxpayer undertook transportation as a seller, not a service provider, and service tax is not leviable as service provider service recipient relationship is missing. This is in case of Oil India. So last ruling for today is a appellate authority order. So in this case, the issue related to refund of service tax on cancellation of book flat. So the appellate authority held that No service is provided by builder if contract is terminated and consideration is returned. Refund of service tax is available under section 142(5) of CGST Act. And lastly, they held that date of cancellation of flat is relevant date for computing 1 year under section 11B and not date of payment of tax. In our view, on the merits, the ruling is correct that refund should be available, but under law, the relevant date is date of payment of tax only. So to that extent, this ruling is incorrect. So with this, we come to an end of today's session, and we'll take up your questions now. So you can raise your hand. There's a slide in front of you. You can raise your hand and we'll be happy to take your questions. Yeah. Mr. Preetham Visht, you have self-muted yourself. You can unmute and ask your question. Mr. Preetham Visht, sir, you can unmute and ask your question. Okay. If anyone else has question, you can raise your hands. Sure. So there were a lot of questions which we got on the chat box and through mail. So Akanksha, you can take the name and address the question.
So first question was from Mr. Binit Agarwal. Can you please, from Adidas, the question is regarding the QR code requirement for B2C invoices, which is starting from 1st of December 2020. So as we have already highlighted in the slides, that this requirement is basically for dynamic QR code. Now, there is a difference between the dynamic QR code and the normal static QR code that we are currently printing for the e-invoicing purposes. So this is just for the purpose of payment, and all the payment requirement details, that is the link, would be hidden in this dynamic QR code through which we need to make the payment on the portal.
Mr. Rajiv Sharma wants to ask some question. We'll just unmute you. Mr. Rajiv Sharma, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. From our side, we have unmuted. Mr. Rajiv Sharma.
The next question is from Mr. Sunil Gupta from HMSI. Is debit or credit note involving GST need to be uploaded on e-invoice? Yes. So it's very clear that for tax invoice, debit notes and credit notes, in all these cases, e-invoicing is mandatory. However, the IRIN generation would be done separately, which means for debit note and credit notes, separate IRIN has to be generated. Is self-invoice under RCM need to be uploaded on e-invoices portal for generation of IRIN? This we have already covered in our slide that yes, it will be specifically covered only in few cases, but not self-invoicing. Next question is from Mr. Gursaran Das from DS FISCO Private Limited. The question is regarding department is not allowing the refund under inverted duty structure for services. So what is the way forward in this case? So as we have already highlighted in preceding slides that there have been a lot of issues regarding the inverted duty structure refund, and BKC footsteps ruling was on the correct merits. So considering that, it is advisable that we should continue to file the refund for the inverted duty structure and go for the litigation in case it is rejected by the authorities. Next question is from Mr. Sumana Raghavendra from Velocity Systems. Role of HSN and SEC codes correctness and consequences in case of any variances. So HSN SEC codes are very much relevant basis whatever turnover you have. However, if there will be any discrepancy in the correctness, there is no as such implications which have been proposed by the government so far in the GST Council meeting or anywhere else. What would be the role of e-invoice for audit purposes? Would we will require a hard copy for the same? So as of now, there is no requirement to mandatorily prepare a hard copy and maintain it for audit purposes. The soft copy is very much sufficient. Any provision for tracking supplier turnover on GST portal? So there is no specific provision for tracking the turnover details. We can just track their return filing status from 2A and 2B. Information on TCS applicability that we have already covered, that there is a separate disclosure which they have provided in INV 01 format, and under other charges it can be covered.
We'll just unmute Mr. Rajiv Sharma. Mr. Rajiv Sharma, you can unmute. You can ask your question now. Hello. Mr. Rajiv, you can speak your question. Hello. Hello. Mr. Rajiv, you can ask your question. Okay. Mr. Anand Jalan, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello. Hello.
Mr. Anand?
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Like we have a company doing a travel business. So in that case, our air ticketing are under pure agent concept. So in the format of e-invoicing, we cannot upload the basic amount of air ticket because it is not taxable value. As of we are charging as a management fee amount, which is a taxable value. So how we will upload the e-invoice in the portal?
So currently, you can disclose all this amount. There is no special disclosure for covering these areas. So it can be only covered under taxable value only. There is no specific column for disclosing these details as of now in the scheme.
But in the current invoice, we used to display our basic amount as an pure agent concept and as a management fee as a taxable amount. So in that case, the only management fee amount will be shown in the invoice copy, or the whole amount should be shown in the invoice copy.
So whatever would be your taxable amount, if it is only the management fees, then it is better to disclose only that amount. And so there are 2-3 columns. So you can find your final taxable amount can be computed in that manner. You have to mention that accordingly in your schema, and whatever is your final taxable amount, that can be computed.
Okay, thanks.
Next question is from Mr. Satyajit Deshmukh. Whether government is going to provide any relaxation for ITC availment against invoices raised by taxpayers having turnover less than rupees 5 crores. Since these taxpayers are going to play a major role while deciding ITC under Rule 36(4) of CGST Act. So as we have discussed that yes, there will be a relaxation for of quarterly filing for all these small taxpayers. So definitely the ITC will be deferred in all these cases. So it's better that we keep a check and do the reconciliations on a periodical basis and not defer it to quarterly. But other than that, there is no relaxation as of now. It has to be deferred. The next question is from Mr. Rajat Maheshwari. Can we file GSTR 9 and 9C for previous periods by logging into the GST portal even after surrendering our GSTIN? Yes. So the answer to this would be that first of all, you need to check that whether your GSTN credentials are still functional or not. Generally, they are not deactivated anytime later your GSTN is surrendered. So if it is functional, definitely you can log in, you can file your returns. It will not block your returns for the previous periods. And if it is not functional, then the option would be to file a manual returns to the department. The last question is from Mr. Vipin Kathuria. If rejected coal is being sold by the company to the vendor and paying GST liability in cash on rejected coal sale, can we take proportionate ITC on coal purchased? So answer is yes, we can definitely take the ITC. There is no reversal specifically which is required in these cases.
Yeah, you can unmute. Just try Mr. Rajiv Sharma again. Mr. Rajiv Sharma, hello. So you can ask your question. So you have typed your question. So the question is relating to the scrutiny under section 61. Can it be undertaken comparing e-way bill data with GSTR 3B data? So in our view, it can be undertaken because as far as GSTR 3B is concerned, the government can verify whether all ITC or whether all output liability has been proper or not. So to that extent, if there's a discrepancy between e-way bill data and GSTR 3B, you are responsible to reconcile the same. Any questions? You can take this.
So next question is from Mr. Ravikant Dwivedi. Whether e-invoice is required on B2C transactions? So yes, it is not a B2C e-invoicing which is required in these cases. There is only a requirement of printing dynamic QR code, which also has been deferred to 1st of December 2020. Otherwise, you cannot generate e-invoice. The portal won't accept your request for B2C transactions. Another question from Mr. Ravikant Dwivedi is whether e-invoice is required against zero value invoices. So zero rated invoices, what we understand is specifically if we talk about the export invoices, then definitely yes, we need it. However, for SEZ supplies, there was a notification which exempted all the SEZ suppliers from the e-invoicing.
Yeah, that's all. So with this, we come to end of today's session. We again thank you for joining in large number, and we'll again meet you in November with our next roundup edition. Yeah. Thank you once again.
Thank you.